What happens when two people from completely different worlds find themselves facing the same longing for connection and purpose? Follow Emily and Jack as their unexpected journey leads them to a love that neither could have imagined, and find out if they can truly leave behind everything they thought defined them. Share your thoughts below. What does home truly mean to you? Jack Davidson, a mechanic in a quiet town nestled in Oregon, had once lived a life full of love, laughter, and shared dreams. But that was before Carol, his wife of 8 years, passed away from breast cancer. She had been just 38 years old, leaving behind a hole in Jack's heart so deep that no amount of work or distraction could fill it. Their daughter, Emma, was only 5 at the time, too young to fully understand the gravity of the situation, but old enough to feel the shift in their world. Jack had always been a man of quiet strength, the kind of man who believed that hard work could solve any problem. But Carol's death was a problem that no amount of grease under his fingernails or engine repairs could fix. The grief he carried was silent, but it was a weight that pressed on him every moment of every day. The garage, once a place of joy, where he and Carol had shared their hopes and dreams for the future, now felt empty. It became a place of refuge, but not for joy, only for the mechanical hum of engines and the familiar tasks that kept him moving forward. Every day, Jack would wake up at 6 o'clock a.m., like clockwork, to brew coffee and prepare breakfast for Emma. Heart-shaped pancakes were her favorite, and Jack had learned to make them just right, even though Carol had always been the baker in the family. After breakfast, Emma would chatter excitedly about her dreams from the night before, her innocent voice a small comfort in the loneliness that Jack felt. He didn't smile much anymore, not like he used to, but Emma was always there, pulling him back to the present, even when the memories of Carol threatened to drown him. The work at the garage kept him busy. Jack wasn't rich, but he was good at what he did. He worked with his hands and had an innate sense of understanding how things worked, whether it was a broken-down car or a broken heart. His customers were mostly regular folks, taxi drivers, delivery workers, and students with old, worn-out cars. They didn't have much, but they trusted Jack, and Jack, in turn, gave them everything he had, fixing their cars without asking for more than he knew they could afford. This was the life Jack had built for himself and Emma, one of routine, of hard work, and of quiet resilience. But despite the routine, despite the steady rhythm of his life, Jack couldn't shake the feeling of something missing. His heart still ached, and the silence in the garage sometimes felt like it was swallowing him whole. Emily Harris had everything one could wish for: money, fame, and a career that many could only dream of. As the CEO of Harris Innovations, a cutting-edge tech company, Emily was known as one of the most powerful women in the business world. At just 37 years old, she had built an empire from the ground up, a company valued at billions of dollars, and her name was synonymous with success. Her office, perched on the 45th floor of a sleek skyscraper in Manhattan, offered panoramic views of the city, a city that never slept, just like her. But despite the accolades and the wealth, Emily felt an emptiness that no amount of success could fill. Every day, she sat in her designer chair, her fingers brushing the latest contract, her eyes scanning numbers, her mind constantly consumed by the pressure of decisions that could make or break fortunes. It was a life of endless meetings, phone calls, and dinner parties where no one cared to know the real Emily. They only cared about what she could do for them. And it was in one of those sterile, high-profile dinners that Emily's engagement to David Sterling, a prestigious banker from a powerful family, had fallen apart. The truth was, David had never loved her. He had only loved the status her name brought him. He had made that clear one evening, speaking of how their marriage would solidify his family's investments and boost their business portfolio by 30%. Emily had listened, her heart sinking as she realized how little he actually knew about her. She was more than just a pawn in a game of business. David had stumbled, trying to salvage the conversation, but it was too late. Emily set down her fork, and with quiet resolve, she ended their engagement, choosing to face her loneliness rather than live a lie. It wasn't that she didn't want love. It was that she wanted something real, something grounded in who she was, not in what people saw her to be. After the breakup, Emily made a decision. She would step away from the whirlwind of her high-powered world, even if only for a short while. She needed to rediscover who she was beneath the polished surface, to find the woman who had dreamed of helping others, who had once worked in coffee shops and studied on scholarships, who had fallen in love with technology because it had the power to change lives. She packed a bag, left New York behind, and set off on a road trip, not knowing where it would lead, but knowing she couldn't stay in the life that had consumed her. The freedom she sought was somewhere beyond the glass walls of her office, somewhere out there in the open roads, far from the expectations and the pressures that had defined her every move. She just needed to find it. As Emily rode through the rolling hills and dense forests of Oregon, the wind rushing past her and the sound of her Harley-Davidson humming beneath her, she felt a sense of freedom she hadn't known in years. The open road was her escape, a place where no one knew her name, where she wasn't expected to be the powerful CEO, the woman who made decisions that affected millions. For the first time in what felt like forever, she could just be herself, a woman who didn't have to wear a mask or measure her worth by stock prices or boardroom victories. But as the weather shifted and dark clouds began to gather overhead, Emily's sense of relief started to fade. The storm came faster than she expected, and within minutes, she found herself soaked, her motorcycle sputtering and stalling out in the pouring rain. She tried to restart it several times, but the engine wouldn't cooperate, its stubborn refusal a mirror of her own frustration. Her phone had died hours ago, a deliberate choice to disconnect from the world, and now, stranded in the middle of nowhere, she realized just how disconnected she truly felt. She glanced around, hoping for some sign of help, and that's when she saw it. A small garage across the street, the warm glow of lights spilling from the door, offering an inviting sense of safety in the midst of the storm. Emily stood there for a moment, feeling the cold rain soaking through her jacket, her hair plastered to her face. She had never been the type to ask for help. In fact, she had built her life around the idea that she didn't need anyone. But now, with the rain pouring down and her motorcycle useless, she felt vulnerable for the first time in years. With no other choice, she walked across the street, her steps slow and hesitant, as if unsure of what she was about to do. As she reached the door, it opened, and a man stepped out, his presence warm and grounded. Jack Davidson, A man whose hands were stained with motor oil looked at her with a quiet, steady gaze that somehow made her feel seen, not as a CEO, but as just another person in need. He didn't ask questions, didn't judge. He simply stepped aside and invited her in, offering her a place to sit while he worked on her bike. The simplicity of his kindness was jarring, and for the first time in years, Emily felt the weight of her loneliness lift, if only for a moment. As Jack worked, Emily watched him with a strange sense of calm. His hands moved with ease, fixing the bike with the skill of someone who had spent a lifetime working with engines. It wasn't just the repair that amazed her. It was the quiet confidence, the way he didn't need anything from her. In a world where people were constantly asking for something in return, Jack seemed to be the rare exception. His kindness, his generosity, felt like a balm on a wound she hadn't even realized was still bleeding. And as she sat there, listening to the rain and watching Jack work, Emily realized that she had just stumbled into something she hadn't known she was looking for, a place where she could simply be, without the weight of the world on her shoulders. She wasn't a CEO here. She wasn't a woman defined by her success or her wealth. She was just Emily, someone who had found unexpected solace in a small garage, in the hands of a stranger who offered nothing but help. Over the next few days, Emily returned to Jack's garage under the pretense of checking on her bike, but each visit began to feel more like a quiet escape. There was something about the simplicity of the place, the hum of tools, and the scent of motor oil that made her feel like she was finally breathing again. In her world, everything was so fast-paced. Decisions, deals, deadlines. But here, in Jack's small garage, time seemed to slow down. It was almost as if the world outside didn't exist, and all that mattered was the moment. Jack had no idea who Emily truly was. She didn't tell him about her company, her fame, or her past. Instead, she found herself talking to him about something else entirely, the things she hadn't shared with anyone in years. The small joys, the mundane stories, and the quiet moments that made life feel real again. Emily learned about Jack's life, too. He spoke about his late wife, Carol, with a tenderness that broke Emily's heart. It was clear that Jack's love for her never truly faded. He spoke of the quiet mornings they had shared, of making pancakes for their daughter Emma, and of the pain that had lingered long after Carol passed away. Jack didn't speak much of his grief, but Emily could feel it in the way he talked about his daughter, in the way he smiled softly when Emma asked about fixing cars. There was something in his eyes, a quiet strength, the kind that only comes from surviving loss. It made Emily realize how much she had taken for granted. Here she was, surrounded by wealth and status, and yet she had never felt the kind of genuine connection that seemed to flow so naturally between Jack and his daughter. The more time she spent in the garage, the more she realized that what she had been searching for wasn't freedom from her responsibilities or escape from her high-powered life. It was connection, something real and grounded, something that didn't come with a price tag or a performance to be put on. When Jack invited her to dinner one evening, it wasn't a lavish meal. It was simple. Spaghetti with a side of salad, the kind of food that didn't need to impress anyone, just to nourish. As they sat around the small table, with Emma chattering away about school and her dreams of becoming a veterinarian, Emily felt a warmth in her chest that she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just the food, though. It was the conversation. It was the laughter. It was the ease of being around people who didn't expect anything from her, who simply accepted her as she was. For once, Emily didn't have to be the tech mogul, the businesswoman, or the high-powered CEO. She could just be Emily, and it felt like a gift. In the midst of the simplicity of their lives, Emily began to feel something shifting inside her, a slow, steady pull towards something deeper, something she had been missing for so long. Maybe it wasn't freedom she needed after all. Maybe what she was searching for was this: connection, love, and the peace that came with truly being seen for who she was, not what she could do. It was a realization that settled deep within her, and it felt both freeing and terrifying at the same time. But in Jack's garage, with Emma laughing in the background and the smell of spaghetti in the air, Emily felt like she was finally home. One afternoon, as Emily was sitting in the garage, her phone buzzed incessantly, its sound jarring in the otherwise peaceful setting. She glanced at the screen, recognizing the number. It was Jessica, her assistant back in New York. Emily hesitated for a moment, her heart heavy with the knowledge that her brief escape from her high-powered world was coming to an end. She answered the call reluctantly, trying to steady the nerves that suddenly rose in her chest. "Emily, thank God you picked up. We've been trying to reach you all day. There's an emergency board meeting. The stock price has dropped 12%. The media is speculating about your health, and no one knows where you are. We need you back in the office immediately." Emily's heart sank as she listened to the frantic voice on the other end. She had been so careful, so deliberate in disconnecting, and now it felt like her past life was catching up with her. She could hear the weight of the words: stock price, emergency, speculation. The world she had tried to escape was still alive and breathing, waiting for her return. Emily hung up the phone slowly, her hands trembling. She sat there in the garage, the hum of the engine in the background, but it suddenly felt distant, almost unreal. Jack, who had been working on a car nearby, noticed the change in her expression. He stopped and walked over to her, his brow furrowed in concern. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his voice gentle, but filled with worry. Emily met his gaze, her eyes clouded with a mixture of frustration and guilt. "I have to go back," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's a crisis at work. I—" She paused, struggling to find the words. How could she explain to him what she had been running from? How could she make him understand the weight of the life she had left behind? Jack looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a quiet sigh, he asked, "Is this really what you want?" His question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Emily didn't know how to answer. She had come to care for this quiet town, for Jack, for the life that was so different from the one she had left behind. But now, the pull of her responsibilities, the company, the stockholders, the endless meetings, was calling her back. She had built an empire, but it was an empire that was built on the foundation of expectation and pressure, not love and peace. "I don't know anymore," Emily confessed, her voice shaking. "I thought I was looking for freedom, but now I realize it's not freedom I need. It's something real, something that's not tied to all the things I've worked for." Jack nodded, his face softening. "I can't tell you what to do, Emily," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "But I think you know the answer yourself." The words hit her harder than she expected. The truth was, she didn't know the answer. All she knew was that the woman she had been, the woman who had built Harris Innovations from nothing, was starting to feel like a stranger to her. She longed for something more, a life that wasn't defined by stock prices or corporate strategies, a life that was defined by genuine connection and love. But as she looked at Jack, standing there with his quiet strength and understanding, Emily realized how much she had to lose. She had come to care for him, and for the first time in years, she had allowed herself to be vulnerable. And now, the future she had been running from was waiting to pull her back in. As she stood there, torn between two worlds, Emily felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, the life she was looking for wasn't found in the boardrooms of New York or in the glass towers of corporate America. Maybe it was here, in the quiet of Jack's garage, in the warmth of his company, and in the life he had built. A life that was real, a life that was full. It was the day after Emily's conversation with Jack that everything changed. Emily had been trying to ignore the nagging sense of responsibility that clung to her like a shadow, but she could no longer push it aside. She woke up that morning with the phone calls still echoing in her mind. The crisis at work wasn't going away. She needed to return to New York, to face the mess she had left behind. But just as she was getting ready to pack her bags, the phone call that came next made her world freeze. It was Maria, the coffee shop owner from next door to Jack's garage. Her voice was shaky, filled with worry. "Emily, it's Emma. There's been an accident. She fell off her bike and hit her head. They're taking her to Oregon Health and Science University Hospital. Marcus he's beside himself. He's not eating. He's not doing well at all. You need to come right away." Emily felt her heart stop for a moment. Emma, Jack's little girl, the bright, innocent soul who had brought so much light into her life, was in trouble. The thought of her lying in a hospital bed made Emily's chest tighten. Without thinking, she grabbed her things, rushed to her car, and drove to the hospital. The drive felt endless, and every second that passed was another layer of fear building inside her. When she arrived at the hospital, she found Jack sitting in a waiting room, his eyes red from crying, his face ashen. He looked lost, broken in a way she hadn't seen before. The sight of him like this made her heart ache in ways she didn't know it could. She approached him quietly, unsure of what to say. He didn't even look up when she sat beside him. "She's in there," Jack whispered, his voice hoarse. "The doctors, they say they might have to do surgery. I don't know how to do this, Emily. I don't know how to fix this." Emily reached out, taking his hand in hers. The gesture felt so small, so insignificant compared to the weight of what they were facing. But it was the only thing she could give him. "You don't have to do this alone," she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. We'll get through this together." She could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the toll the past few days had taken on him. It wasn't just the fear for Emma's health. It was the fear of being alone again, of losing everything. Emily didn't know if her words would make a difference, but she hoped they would. The waiting felt endless, but eventually the doctor came out, giving them the good news that Emma would need a bit of time to heal. But the surgery had gone well, and she was stable. As the relief washed over Jack's face, Emily knew, without a doubt, that this was where she needed to be. She had come back not out of guilt or obligation, but because, in that moment, she realized something important. She loved them. She loved Jack and Emma. And nothing in her previous life had ever felt as real or as meaningful as this. As they sat together in the quiet hospital room, watching Emma sleep peacefully, Emily finally understood. Love was the thing she had been searching for all along, and it was here, in the simplest of moments, in the act of being there for each other, that she found the peace she had been so desperately seeking. This was the life she had been meant to live. No corporate meetings, no stock prices, just the quiet, everyday love of a family who truly needed her. A month had passed since Emma's accident, and things had slowly begun to settle into a rhythm. Emma was recovering well, her bright smile returning every day as she regained her energy. Jack was still taking care of everything, with the quiet strength that had always been his trademark. But there was something different now. Emily had stayed in Portland, not as a visitor, but as a part of their lives. She had rented a small apartment near Jack's garage, and for the first time, her life felt like it had purpose beyond boardrooms and business deals. She helped Jack around the garage when she could, learning to repair small things, even getting her hands dirty, something she never would have imagined doing in her previous life. It felt right. Every morning, she would wake up and make breakfast for Jack and Emma, sometimes pancakes, sometimes toast with jam. But it was always made with care, not out of obligation, but because she genuinely enjoyed these quiet, simple moments. Jack would always smile, his eyes soft with appreciation, and Emma would giggle as she ate, telling Emily stories of her daydreams and adventures. As the days passed, Emily began to see life in a new light. The small things, the things she had once thought unimportant, were now the things that made her happiest. The feeling of Emma's arms around her as she helped her get ready for school. The sound of Jack's voice as he patiently explained car parts to her. Even the quiet moments in the evening when the three of them would sit together, watching the stars or reading stories. These were the moments that had once eluded her. Emily realized that she had found something more meaningful than success in the corporate world. She had found a family, a sense of belonging she had never known she was missing. And for the first time in years, she knew that this, right here, was the life she wanted. No more running, no more pretending, just love in its purest form, and the quiet, everyday joy of being exactly where she was meant to be.